Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our Chats with Emily, as we are calling our readings through the Johnson edition of the complete poems of Emily Dickinson. We are now at poem 107, "'Twas Such a Little Boat." Now, when this poem was published in 1890, it was actually called Unreturning, which is going to make this poem an interesting poem. Like, why would it be called that? Emily didn't call that. By the way, we are back to this notion that the soul is in some ways like a boat. Obviously, Yeats will borrow heavily from this idea in his Sailing to Byzantium, and therefore I have sailed the seas and come to the holy city of Byzantium and all of that. Now, we saw some of this already in poems 4 and 30 and our study already, and that leads us to our assumptions. My hope is that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net, down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily, our playlist. I'm hopeful that you already have studied our introductory set of comments, and I'm hopeful that you have already worked through the previous 106 poems. We just finished with The Daisy Follows Soft the Sun. Now, Emily, and I was just talking to my Emily group about this, and they said, you know, it's so true that Emily is able to capture so powerfully the sense of loss that we all feel when we live our lives. And here we're going to have another poem about loss, but it isn't completely clear what is lost. Some have read this about death, this poem about death, but many will say, no, I don't think it's about death here. The word little, as we've already pointed out in a number of poems already, is used in 172 poems. 3 times this word will get used in this poem, so we're going to have to ask about that. And then right there in the very first line of little, notice the repetition. I'm also going to challenge you to think about the verbs that are a part of this and her use of the word lost. You'll remember in poem 23, I had a guinea golden, I lost it in the sand. 41 poems the word lost is used, and I think Emily was very much about being lost and being found. She obviously knew the Christian hymn, I once was lost, but now I'm found in amazing grace. Let's enjoy the poem. "'Twas such a little boat that toddled down the bay. 'Twas such a gallant sea that beckoned it away. 'Twas such a greedy wave that licked it from the coast. Nor ever guessed the stately sails. My little craft was lost." Now, I find this a fascinating poem for a number of reasons. The repetition of these words, little, gallant, greedy, all make this a fascinating little poem to study. And I'm more interested in the very last 2 lines, "Nor ever guessed the stately sails, my little craft was lost." So it's almost like there's a juxtaposition between, on the one hand, her, notice, little boat, and then the stately sails of a large, beautiful boat. So the comparisons are now being made. Obviously, we're familiar with the way Emily loves to play this game, of her emphasizing her, littleness, her fragility, her insignificance. But in the process of doing this, as we've commented already in earlier poems, sometimes we think, maybe Emily is, what is the line from Hamlet about Gertrude? That Gertrude speaks, methinks the lady doth protest too much. Let's work through this. "'Twas such," notice, a little boat. As we said, 172 poems will use this thing little. But look at the next verb, that toddled down the bay, emphasizing infancy, emphasizing immaturity, emphasizing youth, maybe toddling. "'Twas such a gallant," notice the repetition with the dash in between, "gallant sea that beckoned it away." So we're going to go from little boats to sea, to waves, to stately sails. So there's an interesting dance going on here that will lead some readers to go, what exactly is it she's talking about? Her little boat, whatever that is, was somehow beckoned away by the gallant sea. Now, of course, the word gallant can carry with it the idea of courage and the like. "'Twas such," now to the third of these repetitious usages, "'twas such a greedy wave." And now we go from toddle to lick. That licked it from the coast. Of course, the it here would be the little boat, we're assuming that is the antecedent pronoun. "Nor ever guessed the stately sails," of a large, majestic boat, "my little craft was lost." Now, her use of the word lost is significant. 41 poems Emily will use this word lost. You'll remember from poem 23, I had a guinea golden, I lost it in the sand. The idea of being lost and then being found, I think it's fundamental to how we read Emily's project of poetics itself. I think Emily's always searching. She's always looking for that which is lost, to try to reclaim that which is lost. And notice here, whatever it is that was lost, her little boat was called out to sea, again, the gallant sea, by the greedy waves. And somewhere out there, her little boat, her little craft, she goes from being a boat to craft, was lost. Now, I think the word craft is no throwaway. And stay with me on this. I think that Emily is almost always, it seems to me, writing about writing, or the poetic venture, or the artistic experience. On some level or another, go back and look at all 106 poems preceding. You could make the argument that Emily is constantly playing around with the idea of what it's like to be a writer and an artist, which is why, again, those of us who are poets love to read her stuff. Why does she use the word craft? Why didn't she just use the word boat? I think that for her, the idea of her poetic venture as being a craft, as being a boat, as being an art, those words are often, I think, interchangeable. And I find that a fascinating way to read this poem. Now, at 2a, if we're looking for a message or a theme here, I think the argument that she's making is that it is hard to be lost. I think it's hard to be ignored by the stately sails, others, those that you would maybe want to measure yourself against. Notice it's a little boat. The sea is gallant and the waves are greedy, but the sails of another ship are stately. I think the fact that she uses it to be the repetition of little, gallant, and greedy, and the word choice of craft at the end makes this a fascinating study. Of course, I'm really interested in these verbs, toddled and licked. I mean, these are fascinating. Both of these are fascinating verbs, no question. At 3a, I mean, there's so many titles we could relate to, but I can't help but think of Stevie Smith's Not Waving but Drowning. And so I'm going to take us there, that really precious poem. We've given full lectures on this at learnstrong.net. I'm not going to in any way exegete this poem. I just want to enjoy reading it. Not waving but drowning. Nobody heard him, the dead man, but still he lay moaning. I was much further out than you thought, and not waving but drowning. Poor chap. He always loved larking, and now he's dead. It must have been too cold for him. His heart gave way. They said, oh, no. It was too cold. Always. Still the dead one lay moaning. I was much too far out all my life, and not waving, but drowning. Now, I have no way to prove this, but I think Stevie Smith possibly could draw heavily in a poem like that from a product of Emily's like this. For you at 3B, how are we going to own a set of lines like this? What was a time in your life that you felt ignored by the stately sails, when you felt maybe that your craft was lost? And to what degree is your study of Emily helping you to come to terms with that? I hope so. Thank you.